I'm pretty sure my cabin is haunted. Unknown author. Where do I begin? It started a week ago. I had just moved into my new place, a modest house in the woods of Maine. I'm starting a new IT job in Portland, and the company paid for the move. Even had the old apartment packed for me. For a 23-year-old, I have to say I was pretty happy. I was about to pull a six-figure salary. I had my own place, and I had my dog Zoe. It didn't take long for my attitude to change. The house wasn't much. It was a 30-minute drive from the city, and at 1,800 square feet, it really was a cabin in the woods. I figured it would be a great place for Zoe to run free, and I liked having my space. The house came furnished, and inside was what you'd expect for a rustic cabin. Antlers, an old leather lounge chair, and lots of wood. Then there was the cellar. Strangely, you couldn't get to it from inside the house. At the back of the house, next to the deck, was a storm cellar entrance with two rusting metal doors secured by a latch. The latch still had a lock on it, and I just assumed the realtor had forgotten about it. I didn't start work for a week, so I planned on spending the time getting used to the area and tidying up the house. I kept a journal, kind of a weird hobby for a 23-year-old, but I like writing. Day 1. Zoe won't stop barking. I don't know what her deal is. Maybe she's just pissed because we're not at her apartment anymore. The movers did a great job. The little furniture I had is set up where I wanted it, and the kitchen and bathrooms were unpacked for me. I'm sure I'll have to reorganize some of it, but it saves me a lot of work. I was sitting in the lounge chair after the movers had gone, just soaking it all in and staring at an empty fireplace, when Zoe started growling at something in the yard. I got up to peer out the glass door to the deck. Zoe had her nose pressed up to it and her teeth bared. It wasn't quite dark yet, but the last rays of light were filtering through the trees. I opened the door and felt the crisp autumn breeze, and in the half a second I closed my eyes to breathe it all in, Zoe was full speed across the deck. She was growling at the storm cellar door, her body tense and low, like she was threatened. I called after her, and she looked up at me and sprinted back inside. It was a little creepy. Now, I'm going to try to go to sleep. Alone. In this house. In the middle of the woods. Yeah. Awesome. Day 2. Well, I was sleeping great until Zoe started barking last night. Let's just say I didn't get much sleep. I went and got bolt cutters this morning. Zoe was still transfixed on the cellar, so I figured opening it would make us both feel better. I don't really know what I was expecting, but there wasn't much there. An old pegboard tool holder on the wall, a dusty workbench with a bunch of empty drawers, and a crawl space in the corner with a dirt floor. The crawl space is elevated about 5 feet, but I peered in it and it was empty too. Disappointing. I did find an old photo album jammed between the concrete wall and the back of the workbench. I paged through it. The photos were black and white, so obviously pretty old. There were lots of baby pictures. From what I could gather, the parents had one child. The father was intense, never smiling in any of the pictures. It seemed like he was staring through you in all the pictures, if that makes any sense. The mother seemed uneasy in the photos. She never looked directly at the camera. The kid got to be about 2 or 3 years old before the pictures stopped. The rest of the album was blank. I don't have internet yet, so I'm going to go to the library tomorrow to do some research. Day 3. Some strange stuff happened last night. Zoe started growling again at 2 in the morning. I kept telling her to shut up, but that didn't work. I grabbed a bat out of the closet and let her out of the room, and of course she starts growling at the glass door to the deck. There was a loud bang, and Zoe started going nuts, barking and growling and clawing at the door. I must have jumped 10 feet. I switched on the outside lights and opened the door, and I froze when I saw the cellar doors open. I knew I had closed them. Zoe didn't follow me outside. She stopped barking and started whimpering. I've never seen her like that. I was sufficiently freaked out. I ended up locked in my room, holding the baseball bat. Anyway, I'm going to take a power nap and head to the library. So get this. The family from the photo album disappeared while they were living in this house. I searched this address, and there were a bunch of hits about the case. It's become a bit of a legend, evidently. The kind of thing teenagers scare each other with. It was probably kids exploring last night, daring each other or something. I put a new lock on the storm cellar door and changed the locks to the house, too. Should sleep easier tonight. Day 4. I woke up at 3 a.m. last night, but at first I wasn't sure why. Zoe was still sleeping at the foot of my bed, not making a sound. The house was freezing. I could actually see my breath. Then I heard it. A very quiet tapping on the window of my bedroom. There's no tree or anything outside the window, so I wasn't sure what was making the noise. I couldn't see anything from the bed, so I got up and peered out the window. That's when Zoe started growling. I turned to look at her, and she was staring straight out the window. She started barking at something. I turned back around and put my hand between my face and the glass to see better, and that's when I saw them. About 50 feet out, where the trees started, I could barely make out 3 silhouettes. They were just standing there. It looked like a man, a woman, and a child. I went to the sliding glass door and flicked on the outside lights, and when the lights came on, they just vanished. I didn't sleep after that. It could still be kids screwing around, but man, that was creepy. They installed the internet today. Thank God. I need a distraction from the weird shit that's been going on. Zoe has been on edge since last night. She won't eat either. Hopefully that doesn't last. I rigged up some motion-activated lights outside. At least now I'll know if something's out there. Day 5. Okay, I'm definitely starting to think this may be something other than kids screwing around. I couldn't sleep last night. I kept waiting for some noise outside or for the motion lights to flick on. At 2:30 a.m., both happened. I heard what sounded like a child giggling outside my window. Then there was a loud thump, and the outside lights came on. Zoe, of course, started barking like crazy. I ran to the window and could see it had rained, and in the mud, outside the windowsill, I could make out tiny footprints. I went to the deck and slid open the door to have a better look outside, and Zoe took off running toward the trees. I tried to call her back, but I couldn't. Now it's 3:30 a.m. and still nothing. I love my dog, but there's no way I'm going out in those woods until morning. Zoe still wasn't back by 7 a.m. I went out into the woods armed with a bat and called her name a bunch, but there was no response. I was going to drive into town and look around too, but my car won't start. I think maybe the battery quit because it won't even crank. I discovered the power is out too, probably from the storm, and I'm guessing the local cell tower went down because I have no cell service. I'm feeling a little trapped out here. If it's still like this tomorrow, I'm going to hike into town. I don't care how long it takes. Day 6. What the hell? I woke up to tapping on the window at 3 a.m. It was a lot louder this time, like something wanted in. I jumped up and turned on the deck light switch, but nothing happened. I remembered the power outage and felt stupid. I grabbed a flashlight from my nightstand and peered out the sliding glass door. I saw movement, and a little girl ran into my flashlight beam and stopped. Her back was turned, and she was about 10 feet from the deck. She had long black hair and couldn't have been more than 3 years old. I called down to her, but there was no response. Then she started giggling and slowly turned around. I gagged at what I saw. She had Zoe's body clutched to her chest, but Zoe's head was missing. The little girl's eyes were black, and she smiled at me as she stuck her face into Zoe's open neck and started chewing. I screamed and ran into my room, jumping into bed. I tried my cell again, but I had forgotten to turn it off, and it was dead. I was just starting to calm down. There was a crash, and the bedroom window exploded. That little monster had thrown Zoe's body right through the double-pane glass window and into my room. Glass and blood were everywhere. I heard the giggling again. Much clearer now. And then her little head popped into view where the glass had been. Her skin was a light gray, and she had dark veins running across her face. She smiled and stuck her tongue out, then scampered off into the dark outside. I'm afraid I'm next. When the sun comes up, I'm out of here. For now, I'm locked in the bathroom with a laptop at 25% charge. The noises started again an hour later. This time there were heavy footsteps in the house. I think it was the father. He banged on the bathroom door, but didn't force it open. I heard a shriek that sent chills up my spine, and it felt like the whole house shook. I can't wait anymore. I'm gonna make a run for it. Day 7. Well, it's been a crazy day. Yesterday I ran for it, and as soon as I got outside my bedroom, they were standing there. The father, the mother, and the daughter, all with pitch black eyes. They looked decayed, taut gray skin, thin hair, and rotting teeth showing through impossibly big smiles. They were standing at the sliding glass door, blocking my exit. I ran to the front of the house and bolted out the front door and just started running. It's a 15-minute drive to the first small town, and I ran it. I'm not sure how long it took, but I was exhausted when I got there. I talked someone into calling the police for me. They escorted me back to the house and called a tow truck for my car. When we got there, the officer had a look around. He swears it was some sicko teenagers. I don't know what I'm going to do with the house. For now, there's no way I'm sleeping there. I start work tomorrow, so I'm just gonna go get a hotel until I can figure things out. No one is going to believe me. Maybe if I set up some video cameras. But I don't really want to go back to that cabin. The Cabin. Author unknown. Brendan, I miss you. I sat up with a jolt, heart pumping and dripping with sweat. I looked around, eyes sweeping across the dimly lit, cramped space around my bed. A gust of wind whipped around the outside of the cabin, while the warm glow of a fire crackled away in the corner. I took a deep breath and laid back down, hoping to eke out what sleep I could. But as soon as I shut my eyes, I was driving down a narrow, winding road, the path iced over and flanked by a thicket of trees on either side. Kim mentioned that I was driving a little fast, that perhaps I should slow down. But I ignored her concerns, dismissing them with a wave. I'd driven down this road 100 times. I knew what I was doing. Angela asked if we were there yet, complaining that she was tired. I turned around to answer her, just as a car sped its way around a tight corner. "Look out!" Headlights and eyes. Antlers. I desperately slammed on the brakes and yanked the wheel violently to the left, but it was too late. There was just no time. "Brendan, Angela misses you too." The eerie, haunting voice called out to me once more, echoing from the forest surrounding the cabin. Though I couldn't remember what had happened after the crash and how I ended up at this cabin, I knew that they were gone. My wife and daughter were dead, their bodies still trapped in the wreck by the side of the road. I needed to get to them, if nothing more than to finally lay them to rest. That was the least I could do. And how I tried, but every time I tried to make my way through the woods, to penetrate the dense, snowy maze of trunks, I ended up back here, exhausted and frostbitten. It was hopeless. There was no escaping this cursed place. And so, I languished in my prison, where one day melted into the next, and it never seemed to stop snowing. My days were spent longing for the next time I'd hear Kim's voice. Alas, she began speaking to me less and less, until eventually I gave up hope of hearing from her again. Until one day, dancing over the treetops. I'm so sorry, honey, but we can't keep waiting. We have to move on. I burst through the door, screaming, "Not yet! Not yet!" Legs pumping and fueled by adrenaline, I plowed through the snow and surged towards the tree line. All of a sudden, a chill ran up my spine. Hairs on my neck stood stiff. All around me, trees began falling, and the surrounding ground collapsed, sucked into a bottomless void. The sun went out, and everything was plunged into black nothingness. "Sleep well, Brendan, my love," a woman said as she held the man's hand, the monitor by the hospital bed beeping as it drew a flat line. The Whispering Shadows by NetherPlaysVR. In the sleepy town of Willowbrook, Nestled amidst the dense woods, an aura of unease lingered, a hushed secret passed down through generations. It was said that the whispering shadows, a spectral presence, haunted the woods and brought doom to those who ventured too close. Emily, a young photographer with an adventurous spirit, had recently moved to Willowbrook, drawn to its natural beauty. Eager to capture the essence of the town, she set off into the woods one crisp autumn afternoon, her camera slung over her shoulder. As she ventured deeper into the forest, the dense canopy above began to swallow the sunlight, and the air grew heavy with a palpable tension. Unbeknownst to Emily, a local legend warned against wandering too far into the woods alone. The whispering shadows were said to be vengeful spirits of those who had met gruesome fates, and they preyed on intruders. But curiosity, like a dark force, compelled her forward. Soon, Emily lost her way, the trees forming an impenetrable maze around her. Her heart pounded with fear as she heard faint, chilling whispers, like the murmurs of restless souls. She tried to retrace her steps, but every path seemed to lead her deeper into the darkness. As night fell, Emily's fear intensified. The whispers grew louder, and she could feel an unseen presence closing in. She snapped photographs in all directions, hoping to capture evidence of what lurked among the trees. But when she reviewed the pictures, her blood ran cold. In each photo, shadowy figures seemed to loom, their eyes glowing with malevolence. Desperation drove Emily onward, her flashlight trembling in her trembling hand. The forest, once alive with chirping crickets and rustling leaves, now held an eerie silence. She stumbled upon an old, decrepit cabin hidden deep within the woods, its window shattered and its door hanging off its hinges. Cautiously, she entered, her heart pounding with trepidation. The interior was shrouded in darkness, save for a flickering candle at the far end. Emily approached, her breath catching in her throat when she saw a series of photographs displayed on the cabin's walls. They were images of people, their eyes hollow and filled with despair, their skin unnaturally pale. In every photograph, the whispering shadows loomed in the background. Emily realized the grim truth. The cabin had belonged to a previous victim, and these were their final moments, captured in chilling detail. She turned to flee, but the door slammed shut behind her, trapping her in this nightmarish cabin. The whispering shadows materialized before her, their ghostly forms contorted in agony. They whispered tales of their torment and despair, filling Emily's mind with horrors beyond imagination. She clutched her camera, snapping one final photograph as her sanity unraveled. Weeks later, search parties combed the woods for Emily, but they found only her camera, lying on the ground outside the cabin. The photographs it contained were a testament to her nightmarish encounter. Willowbrook's legend of the whispering shadows lived on, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked in the heart of the woods, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to wander too close. Lumberjack by the Prowler. I think it is only right that I warn who I can, when I can, of the dangers of staying up at the old Mill Creek cabin off Highway 69. Up the old dirt road, partially hidden by overgrowth and brush, just past mile marker 9, you will find the cabin, looking lovely and quaint, surrounded by its peaceful setting. But don't be fooled, my fellow travelers, for looks can be deceiving. Two families made that same mistake back in 1992, the Mackenzies and the Loomises. Two large families, each consisting of 2 parents and 4 children, embarked on their vacation like many times before. Except they didn't know that this time they picked the wrong place to stay at. Rumor has it that Mr. Mackenzie found an ad in a Field and Stream catalog advertising cheap cabins to rent for the summer. While I must admit the cabin does feature many pleasant amenities, such as an outdoor kitchen and fire pit, the lake mere steps from the back sliding glass door that comes complete with a dock and fishing boat. However, there's a reason it's cheap, my friends. The property is supposedly haunted. You see, the land the cabin sits on adjoins the old Mill Creek lumberyard, which the main building still stands, abandoned and decrepit, just about a half-mile down the old dirt road from the cabin itself. Legend has it, back in 1908, the mill was attacked by the Native American tribes of the area, seeking revenge for the destruction of their land and murder of their loved ones, brought about by the workers of the mill. Most of the mill workers were able to escape, but for those who didn't, the massacre that transpired was too unbelievable to even fathom. Most of the remaining workers were killed on the mill site, but one man was able to flee to the cabin, which had just been newly built for the night watchman to patrol the property at night. The lone logman, however, did not make it inside. He was taken down on the porch by a handful of warriors. The lumberjack, they say, put up quite the fight. His name was Seamus O'Leary, a red-headed Irishman built like a brick shithouse. He used his muscular frame and tall height to try and fight his way out of the warriors' clutches, but there were too many, and they strung him up on the oak tree just outside the cabin door. His neck did not snap right away. He struggled and kicked, fighting with every ounce of strength he had left. The warriors had had enough at that point, so 2 of them grabbed Seamus by his legs, and a 3rd warrior pulled out his knife and gutted him on the spot. The next morning, when the workers returned with help, they happened upon the lumberjack hanging from the tree, dead, his intestines strewn all over the bloodied grass beneath him. Needless to say, the property and the cabin have a dark past, and there have always been rumors of the land being haunted by spirits, or that it's cursed by Seamus, the lumberjack. And there have been plenty of strange accidents over the years, lots of strange, unexplainable events, but there was never any proof. That is, until the Mackenzie and the Loomis families checked in. They were there for only a couple of days before things started to happen. Items disappearing, strange marks on the bodies, scratches and other injuries, things moving on their own. The first major incident was the death of the Mackenzie's dog. It was found on the morning of the 4th day by the oak tree, gutted, with its intestines strewn about. The Mackenzie's youngest boy, John, found the dog, a sight he'll never forget. I promise you that. Both families were absolutely shaken with fright. They reported the incident to the local authorities, but there were no clues and nothing they could do. The last time any member of the families were seen in public was 3 days later. It was at the general store, Mr. Mackenzie and Mr. Loomis had gone in looking to purchase a couple of rifles under the assumption of everyone that they were going out hunting. The two men were disheveled and looked as if they hadn't slept in days. The two purchased the rifles and plenty of ammo, plus other supplies, and were on their way. The townspeople were right. The two men were hunting, but they were hunting something they couldn't kill, for it was already dead. What the townspeople did not know, though, was how dire the circumstances at the cabin were. The majority of the two families were already dead, both the wives and all of the children, except for one. The two men became possessed with vengeance. They spent every waking hour of their remaining days searching for a big red-headed lumberjack carrying an axe. Until, on night 20 of being at the cabin, the two men went out searching for the lumberjack, just as they always have, with the lone child waiting back at the cabin, trying to cook a meal with the diminishing supplies they had left. But he watched from the windows as they walked off into the distance. The two men had become very weak, both mentally and physically. Their minds began to wither from anguish and malnourishment. They began to see things that were not there. Even as their faculties were leaving them, Mr. Mackenzie claimed he spotted the lumberjack and shouted at Mr. Loomis, pointing in the direction of the oak tree. They both thought they had seen him at this point, hiding behind the trunk of the oak, and decided to split up to approach him from opposite sides of the tree. They moved in quickly through the dark of the night, with only parts of the moon lighting their way through the dense patches of clouds that dotted the night sky. As they finally got into position, Mr. Mackenzie yelled, "We got you, you son of a bitch! Burn in hell for killing our families!" Simultaneously, the men fired. Two shots echoed out into the quiet night, and when the smoke settled, two bodies fell to the ground dead, Mr. Mackenzie and Mr. Loomis. There was no lumberjack. The boy was able to make his way back into town, shaken and afraid of the things he had witnessed over the past 20 days and nights. He looked a shell of a human being, dirty and unkempt, on the brink of starvation, completely stricken with fear. He wasn't much use to the authorities because of the shock, so they happened upon the grisly scene without proper information. The bodies of the families piled up inside the cabin, and Mr. Mackenzie and Mr. Loomis's bodies, found out by the tree, is what they discovered. And by the state of everything, including the state of the bodies and the causes of death, and the state of the cabin, the authorities deduced a murder-suicide situation. The two fathers went mad with some extreme case of cabin fever and murdered their families, then finally, in their late stage of madness, decided to kill each other, with only the lone child luckily being able to escape before they could kill him as well. The authorities were happy with their conclusion and wrapped up the case and investigation as quickly as possible. Of course, the child who survived, who, by the way, was the Mackenzie's youngest son, John, began to finally come around during the investigation and spoke. He didn't say much because he was still in a state of shock, but he kept uttering the word lumberjack. Then it was scary lumberjack. Then he uttered, "I survived." Finally, one day he looked at his grandmother, who was now his legal guardian, and spoke the chilling sentence, "I survived the scary lumberjack. He murdered everyone." No one believed the boy, however. The case had been deemed solved, and there was no sign of any rogue killer lumberjack, so it was forgotten. Just another story in a long line of rumors. What's that? You ask me how I know so much of what has happened? at the old Mill Creek cabin? Because I'm John Mackenzie, and I survived the Lumberjack. If you're smart, you'll stay away. If you value your life. Killer Uncovered by isickik. The small town of Millfield was plagued by a series of gruesome murders that had taken place over a decade ago. Despite the best efforts of the local police, the killer was never caught and was presumed dead after he disappeared without a trace. Years went by, and the townspeople slowly began to put the case behind them. But for one young woman named Sarah, the memory of the brutal murders never faded. She was determined to uncover the truth and bring closure to the families of the victims. One night, while researching the case at the local library, Sarah stumbled upon a strange article that piqued her curiosity. It was a report of a strange and solitary figure who had been spotted wandering the nearby woods. The description fit that of the missing killer, and Sarah was convinced that she had finally found her quarry. She set out into the woods, armed with nothing but a flashlight and her unwavering determination to bring the murderer to justice. As she delved deeper into the dense forest, Sarah heard a rustling in the bushes. Suddenly, a hand reached out and grabbed her arm, pulling her into the shadows. Trembling with fear, Sarah found herself face to face with the very man she had been searching for. His eyes were wild and crazed, and she realized with a start that he was not dead, but had been living in the woods all these years. The killer told Sarah that he had never been caught because he had a secret that he would only reveal to her. And with that, he led her deeper into the woods, to a small cabin where he had been living in hiding. As Sarah entered the cabin, she was met with the sight of walls covered in newspaper clippings, photos, and notes, all related to the murdered townspeople. The killer was obsessed with his own crimes and had been following the case from a distance all these years. Sarah was horrified, but also fascinated. She was finally getting the answers she had been seeking for so long. The killer revealed all the details of his brutal crimes, and Sarah listened, horrified but unable to look away. Just as she thought she had everything she needed, the killer turned on her, his eyes alight with madness. He lunged at her with a knife, but Sarah was quick and managed to escape. She ran back to town and told the police everything she had learned. The killer was eventually captured and brought to trial, but Sarah never forgot the terror she had experienced in the woods that night. The memory of the murders and the killer's crazed eyes haunted her for years to come. The case was finally closed, but Sarah knew that the horror of Millfield could never be fully forgotten. The Cabin in Whispering Woods by Shroudedheart. Preserved within these ancient woods, I stand as a relic of a sinister past, now lost to the encroaching wilderness. Once, I was the sanctuary of a monster, a serial killer whose wicked deeds forever scarred these woods. I bore witness to unspeakable horrors that strained my very being. Within my walls, the echoes of torment and suffering still reverberate, trapped in an eternal cycle of despair. Nature's tendrils have claimed my worn frame, their gnarled fingers tightly embracing me as a captive of time. Deep lines etched upon my weathered facade tell the story of my countless seasons. Ivy and moss weave a tapestry along my decaying exterior, as if nature herself mourns the darkness that dwelled within. The woods, once accomplices in a reign of terror, have turned against me. The towering trees cast their twisted shadows upon me, as if joining in the condemnation of my dark history. Skeletal branches point accusing fingers. Their whispers echo the sins I have harbored. Through the night. The wind howls, carrying with it anguished cries of forgotten victims, a mournful symphony that echoes through the woods. Their restless spirits haunt these unhallowed halls, forever trapped in the purgatory of their suffering. The air within these worn walls hangs heavy with the lingering stench of decay, a constant reminder of the evil deeds that transpired. My windows, once clear portals to the outside world, now obscured by the grime of time's passage. They hide the horrors they have witnessed. My door's creaking hinges reveal chambers of despair, a chilling narrative of pain and devastation, each room holding the secrets of his macabre rituals. Walls etched by cryptic symbols and grotesque artwork. Dark stains mar the floors, remnants of his unspeakable acts that unfolded within my confinements. I am cursed, bound to bear witness to the terrors inflicted upon the innocent. An ominous presence still lingers within me. Footsteps echo through my hollow halls, a haunting reminder of the relentless pursuit of wickedness that transpired within. The woods themselves whisper tales of dread and tragedy, their ancient secrets intertwined with my dark past. Nature recoils from the darkness that once dwelled within my walls, as if shunning the malevolence that tainted our peaceful embrace. Nightfall becomes a canvas for apparitions, the spirits of the killer's victims forever trapped in spectral purgatory. They silently beseech any wanderer to flee, to escape the clutches of the darkness that still lingers. Beware, weary traveler, I implore you, heed my urgent plea and retreat. Unleash not the horrors that lurk within, for I am forever tainted by unspeakable sins. These woods conceal grim secrets, entwined in their sinister history. Flee into the comforting embrace of light, for my haunted chambers hold naught but relentless darkness and the malevolent legacy of a serial killer's reign. Let instinct guide your steps to safety, lest you be ensnared by the maleficent specters that haunt this place. Haunted Cabin by Top U 5721. So I'm a pretty skeptical person when it comes to the paranormal, albeit having a vested interest in tales and evidence. I'm the kind of person who browses ghost hunter videos on YouTube and these kinds of subreddits. I've also visited plenty of purportedly haunted locations in the U.S., including, but not limited to, places like the Omni Parker House in Boston, Molly Brown House in Denver, the Whaley House in San Diego, Alcatraz at night, and the Winchester House more than once, none of which have yielded any sort of evidence. A part of me wants to believe but also terrified at the prospect of witnessing something. I was mostly a non-believer up until a couple of months ago. In short, I had wanted to plan a surprise party and getaway for my girlfriend's 30th birthday. She had mentioned wanting to go hit the slopes. It was January, so it's still winter time at this point. I organized this months ahead and had invited some of her closest friends to join. I ended up renting an Airbnb cabin that had enough rooms to house 10 people, or 5 couples. One entire lower floor basement level with 2 beds, a room on the first floor, and 3 rooms upstairs. Also adding that this cabin was in a beautiful rural neighborhood in Tahoe, California, with tons of cabins next door, down the street, adjacent, etc. So there's plenty of housing around us. Nothing peculiar about it, and there are other people staying around. Of course, my girlfriend and I take the master bedroom upstairs, and right across the hall is another couple in one room, and my girlfriend's cousin by herself in the 3rd room next door. All rooms are taken, and the middle floor is a lively area with games, a fireplace, and a foosball table. These details are somewhat relevant and important later in my story. The first night was a night of merry drinking and games. To celebrate the occasion, we had decorated the living room and blown up balloons to be loosely strewn around the large and cozy living room and family room where we imbibed. Almost uneventful with respect to weird happenings, except towards the end of the night, balloons would randomly pop at odd intervals. Someone in our group suggested it was the balloons getting attracted towards the heater vents and popping. I was dismissive of this because not all of them that popped were congregated near vents. Cool. I just took note. Didn't want to argue or suggest anything weird at this point. After we all retired for the night and all the lights were off, we could hear balloons pop downstairs at random intervals that reverberated through the silent house. This happened between 2 and 3:30 a.m. The next morning, still plenty of healthy balloons strewn about. Fast forward to night 2. After we returned from snow activities, we prepped for drinking and the usual. After a full day's worth of shredding the snow, we are all collectively tired a bit earlier than the previous night and decide to retire around 11:30, midnight. Here's where I personally experienced things that got me feeling irked. Since it was cold, I decided to go downstairs to turn on the thermostat heater. Our couple friends across the hall had their door slightly open ajar. Lights were on, and the bathroom was in use. As I am going downstairs in the dark stairwell, I hear the floorboards behind me creak, and I figured it was my friend coming out to follow me for a cup of water or to go to the kitchen. As I walk across the living room and stop at the thermostat, the lights are still off at this point, and the creaks continue. And then I hear it stop a few feet behind me, near the kitchen. The kitchen lights don't turn on, and I hear nothing else. Feeling like he was waiting behind me, and I was being watched, I said, "What's up, dude? Need something?" I turn around and nobody is there. I've only ever read about this dreadful feeling of being watched, and it is indeed every bit dreadful upon realization in person. A minute ago, I swore someone followed me down. I was taken aback, and my skeptical ass once again took note and spoke nothing of it. I go back upstairs. About 30 minutes pass and it's still cold. At this point, everyone is asleep, and I decide to turn up the thermostat a couple notches. Nothing crazy. I turn on the upstairs hallway light, bright enough to light the steps and see from downstairs. I proceeded to head downstairs and stop once again at the thermostat. No floorboard creaks, except for my own steps this time. As I am turning up the thermostat and thinking to myself how odd the creaking was the first time, a noise broke my train of thought. I hear the ball from the foosball table, several feet away near the fireplace, audibly roll across its surface and hit one of the side walls. Nobody is around, and I certainly am too far to touch it. I froze in fear and hastily go upstairs back to sleep, not knowing how to mentally process the increasingly evident occurrences. I eventually sleep under the pretense that nothing is definitive enough for me to be conclusively sure that this cabin is haunted. I don't mention or wake anyone up about my experiences. The next morning, as we leave and drive back home, the balloons were brought up by my girlfriend's friend, couple, who stayed across the hall. I took this as an opening to talk about my experiences and disclose them. At this point, my girlfriend's friend goes pale, gets serious, and tells us that the previous night she was still wide awake when she noticed a dark figure standing at the foot of her bed. She stated that she went into panic mode after blinking and realizing it wasn't a dream or hallucination, and shook her boyfriend awake, who I thought followed me down the stairs earlier that night, only to have it disappear. This by far, coupled with my experiences, is undeniable evidence. I myself was wide-eyed upon hearing this solid piece of information. My girlfriend's cousin, who stayed in the room next to us, then mentioned she heard what sounded like breathing in her room, but dismissed it as naturally occurring sounds of the walls in the cabin. These events stand alone, could be nominal and may be explained, but collectively, it's hard to deny that something was present and amiss. I'm hoping this is the extent of my run-ins with the paranormal, because I don't want to experience anything like this again. The universe has made me more of a believer. Ghost encounter as a camp leader. Deleted author. A few summers back, I worked at a camp that was nearly 100 years old. The camp served adults and kids with varying levels of ability of all ages, and was really the highlight of many of the campers' lives. Campers and workers alike joked the place was haunted, but I had thought it was one of those funny camp legends to mess with the campers and share around the fire. As a camp leader, I had my own room in an old cabin, and I shared a bathroom with one other leader who lived on the other separate half of the cabin. One night, I was up late dealing with a camper having a meltdown. After midnight, I had finally gotten her to sleep, and I was trekking back to my own cabin when thunder roared loudly. I sprinted the rest of the way, and as soon as I hit the door, it started pouring. I realized at this moment that I still had my walkie-talkie on me. Usually we charge them in the main office at night, but I decided to not run into the storm, so I turned the walkie-talkie off and set it on my dresser. Shortly after that, I went to bed. I awoke at around 3 a.m. to what felt like someone poking my leg. I was really confused by this sensation. I opened my eyes and looked down at my leg under the sheet where I had felt the poke and saw nothing. I tried to go back to sleep, but a few seconds later, I felt it more aggressively and on a larger scale, as if a whole hand had wrapped around my calf, and I sat up in fear. As I sat up, my walkie-talkie across the room lit up and beeped. Something that could only happen if someone physically turned the side dial and pressed a button. The walkie-talkie stayed on, and I was paralyzed in fear. Eventually, I got up and turned it back off and turned on the room's lights. I checked, and no one was in my room or under my bed or in my closet. There were no objects that could have caused the poking. To this day, it still makes me feel tight-chested thinking about it. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.